Confucianism, also known as Ruism, is described as tradition, a philosophy, a religion, a humanistic, a rationalistic religion, a way of governing, or simply a way of life. Confucianism developed from what was later called the 100 schools of thought from the teachings of the Chinese philosopher Confucius, who considered himself a retransmitter of the values of the Zhou dynasty, golden age of several centuries before. In the Han Dynasty, Confucian approaches edged out the proto-Taoist Huang-Lao as the official ideology, while the emperors mixed both with the realist techniques of legalism. The disintegration of the Han political order in the 2nd century CE opened the way for the doctrines of Buddhism and Neo-Taoism, which offered spiritual explanations lacking in Confucianism. A Confucian revival began during the Tang Dynasty of 618 to 907. In the late Tang, Confucianism developed in response to Buddhism and Taoism and was reformulated as Neo-Confucianism. This reinvigorated form was adopted as the basis of the imperial exams and the core philosophy of the scholar official class in the Song dynasty. The abolition of the examination system in 1905 marked the end of official Confucianism. The new culture intellectuals of the early 20th century blamed Confucianism for China's weaknesses. They searched for new doctrines to replace Confucian teachings. Some of these new ideologies include the three principles of the people, with the establishment of the Republic of China, and then Maoism under the People's Republic of China. In the late 20th century, Confucian work ethic has been credited with the rise of the East Asian economy, with particular emphasis on the importance of the family and social harmony, rather than on an otherworldly source of spiritual values. The core of Confucianism is humanistic. According to Herbert Finger, its concept of the secular as sacred. Confucianism regards the ordinary activities of human life, and especially in human relationships, as a manifestation of the sacred, because they are the expression of our moral nature, which has a transcendent anchorage in heaven and a proper respect for the spirits or gods. While heaven has some characteristics that overlap the category of deity, it is primarily an impersonal absolute, like Tao. Confucianism focuses on the practical order that is given by this worldly awareness of the Tian. Confucian liturgy, led by Confucian priests or sages of rites to worship the gods in public and ancestral Chinese temples, is preferred in various occasions by Confucian religious groups and for civil religious rites over Taoist to popular ritual. This worldly concern of Confucianism rests on the belief that human beings are fundamentally good and teachable, improvable, and perfectible through personal and communal endeavor, especially self-cultivation and self-creation. Confucian thought focuses on the cultivation of virtue and maintenance of ethics. Some of the basic Confucian ethical concepts and practices include Reqten Yi and Li and Ji. Reqten is the essence of the human being, which manifests as compassion. It is the virtue form of heaven. Yi is the upholding of righteousness and the moral disposition to do good. Li is a system of ritual norms and propriety that determines how a person should properly act in everyday life according to the law of heaven. Ji is the ability to see what is right and fair, or the converse, in the behaviors exhibited by others. Confucianism holds one in contempt, either passively or actively, for failure to uphold the cardinal moral values of Reqten and Yi. Traditionally, cultures and countries in the East Asian cultural sphere are strongly influenced by Confucianism, including mainland China, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Macau, Korea, Japan, and Vietnam, as well as various territories settled predominantly by Chinese people, such as Singapore. In the 20th century, Confucianism's influence reduced greatly. In the last decades there have been talks of a Confucian revival in the academic and the scholarly community, and there has been grassroots proliferation of various types of Confucian churches. In late 2015, many Confucian personalities formally established a national Holy Confucian Church in China to unify the many Confucian congregations and civil society organizations. Names and terminology. Strictly speaking, there is no term in Chinese which directly corresponds to Confucianism. In the Chinese language, the character Ru, meaning scholar or learned man, is generally used both in the past and the present to refer to things related to Confucianism. The character Ru in ancient China has diverse meanings. Some examples include weak, soft, to tame, to comfort, and to educate or to refine. Several different terms are used in different situations, several of which are of modern origin: refined school, refined doctrine, refined studies, Confucius teaching, Kong family's business. 3 of these use Ru. These names do not use the name Confucius at all, but instead center on the figure or ideal of the Confucian scholar. However, the suffixes jia, jiao and xue acute carry different implications as to the nature of Confucianism itself. Ru here contains the character jia, which literally means house or family. In this context, it is more readily construed as meaning school of thought, since it is also used to construct the names of philosophical schools contemporary with Confucianism. For example, the Chinese names for legalism and Mohism end in jia. Ru Zhou and Kong Zhao contain the Chinese character jiao, the noun teaching or transmission, used in such terms as education or educator. The term, however, is notably used to construct the names of religions in Chinese. The terms for Islam, Judaism, Christianity, and other religions in Chinese all end with jiao. Rakshay contains xue acute study. The term is parallel to ology in English, being used to construct the names of academic fields. The Chinese names of fields such as physics, chemistry, biology, political science, economics, and sociology all end in xue acute. The use of the term Confucianism has been avoided by some modern scholars who favor Ruism or Ruists in lieu of Confucianism. Robert Eno argues that the term has been burdened with the ambiguities and irrelevant traditional associations. Ruism, as he states, is more faithful to the original Chinese name for the school, the 5 classics and the Confucian vision. Traditionally, Confucius was thought to be the author or editor of the 5 classics, which were the basic texts of Confucianism. The scholar Yao Xinzhong allows that there are good reasons to believe the Confucian classics took shape in the hands of Confucius, but that nothing can be taken for granted in the matter of the early versions of the classics. Quote, Zhou reports that perhaps most scholars today hold the pragmatic view that Confucius and his followers, although they did not intend to create a system of classics, contributed to the formation. Quote, in any case, it is undisputed that for most of the last 2,000 years, Confucius was believed to have either written or edited these texts. The scholar Tu Weiming explains these classics as embodying 5 visions, which underlie the development of Confucianism. I Ching, a classic of change, a book of changes, generally held to be the earliest of the classics, shows a metaphysical vision which combines divinatory art with numerological technique and ethical insight. Philosophy of change sees cosmos as interaction between the 2 energies yin and yang. Universe always shows organismic unity and dynamism. classic of poetry. A book of songs is the earliest anthology of Chinese poems and songs. It shows the poetic vision in the belief that poetry and music convey common human feelings and mutual responsiveness. Book of Documents, a book of history, compilation of speeches of major figures and records of events in ancient times, embodies the political vision, and addresses the kingly way in terms of the ethical foundation for humane government. The documents show the sagacity, filial piety, and work ethic of Lao Chun and Yu. They established a political culture which was based on responsibility and trust. The virtue formed a covenant of social harmony which did not depend on punishment or coercion. Book of Rites describes the social forms, administration, and ceremonial rites of the Zhou dynasty. This social vision defined society not as an adversarial system based on contractual relations but as a community of trust based on social responsibility. The four functional occupations are cooperative. Spring and Autumn Annals chronicles the period to which it gives its name, Spring and Autumn period, and these events emphasize the significance of collective memory for communal self-identification. For reanimating the old is the best way to attain the new. Doctrines, theory and theology. Confucianism revolves around the pursuit of the unity of the self, and Tian is the order of the creation and divine authority. Monistic in its structure, individuals can realize the humanity and become one with heaven through the contemplation of this order. This transformation of the self can be extended to the family and society to create a harmonious fiduciary community. The moral-spiritual ideal of Confucianism reconciles both the inner and outer polarities of self-cultivation and world redemption, synthesized in the ideal of sageliness within and kingliness without. Req10, translated as humaneness, or the essence proper of a human being, is the character of compassionate mind. It is the virtue endowed by heaven and at the same time the means by which man can achieve oneness with heaven, a return to heaven, or comprehend his divine nature. In the Datong Shu it is defined as to form one body with all things, and when the self and others are not separated, compassion is aroused. Tian and the gods. Tian, commonly translated as heaven or sky, but philologically meaning the great one, great whole, is a key concept in Confucianism. It denotes the source of reality, the cosmos, and nature in Chinese religions and philosophies. The Confucians mean by Tian and Li what the Taoists mean by Tao. The Tian can also be compared to the Brahman of Hindu and Vedic traditions. In Analects 9.5, Confucius says that a person can know the movement of the Tian, and speaks about his own sense of having a special place in the universe. In 7.19 he says that he is able to understand the order of Tian. Zigong, a disciple of Confucius, said that Tian had set the master on the path to become a wise man. In Analects 7.23 Confucius says that he has no doubt left that the Tian gave him life, and from it he had developed the virtue. In Analects 8.19 he says that the lives of the sages and their communion with Tian are interwoven. Regarding personal gods in living nature, in Analects 6.22 Confucius says that it is appropriate for people to worship them, though through proper rites, implying respective positions and discretion. Confucius himself was a ritual and sacrificial master. In Analects 3.12 he explains that religious rituals produce meaningful experiences. Rites and sacrifices to the gods have an ethical importance. They generate good life, because taking part in them leads to the overcoming of the self. Analects 10.11 tells that Confucius always took a small part of his food and placed it on the sacrificial bowls as an offering to his ancestors. In original Confucianism, the concept of Tian expresses a form of pantheism. Other philosophical currents, like Mohism, developed a more theistic idea of the Tian. Ethics. Confucian ethics are described as humanistic. This ethical philosophy can be practiced by all the members of a society. Confucian ethics is characterized by the promotion of virtues, encompassed by the five constants, or the Wu Chang, extrapolated by Confucian scholars during the Han Dynasty. The five constants are req, yi, li, ji, xin, dot. These are accompanied by the classical sizi that singles out four virtues, one of which is included among the five constants: zhong, xiao, jie, acute, yi. There are still many other elements, such as cheo teng, xiu, lian, gai, yong, wen, liang, gong, jian, rang. Humaneness req is the Confucian virtue denoting the good feeling of virtuous human experiences when being altruistic. It is exemplified by a normal adult's protective feelings for children. It is considered the essence of the human being endowed by heaven, and at the same time the means by which man can act according to the principle of heaven and become one with it. Zhou Hui, Confucius's most outstanding student, once asked his master to describe the rules of req, and Confucius replied, "One should see nothing improper, hear nothing improper, say nothing improper, do nothing improper." Confucius also defined req in the following way: wishing to be established himself, seeks also to establish others; wishing to be enlarged himself, he seeks also to enlarge others. Another meaning of req is not to do to others as you would not wish done to yourself. Confucius also said, req is not far off, he who seeks it has already found it. req is close to man and never leaves him. Rightly is a classical Chinese word which finds its most extensive use in Confucian and post-Confucian Chinese philosophy. Li is variously translated as right or reason ratio in the pure sense of Vedic RTA when referring to the cosmic law, but when referring to its realization in the context of human individual and social behavior, it has also been translated as custom, mores, and rules, among other terms. Li embodies the entire web of interaction between humanity, human objects, and nature. Confucius includes in his discussions of Li such diverse topics as learning, tea drinking, titles, mourning, and governance; Zunzi cites songs and laughter, weeping and lamentation; rice and millet, fish and meat; the wearing of ceremonial caps, embroidered robes, and patterned silks, or of fasting clothes and mourning clothes; spacious rooms and secluded halls, soft in mats, couches and benches, as vital parts of the fabric of Li. Confucius envisioned proper government being guided by the principles of Li. Some Confucians proposed the perfectibility of all human beings, with learning Li as an important part of that process. Overall, Confucians believe governments should place more emphasis on Li and rely much less on penal punishment when they govern. Loyalty. Loyalty is particularly relevant for the social class to which most of Confucius' students belong, because the most important way for an ambitious young scholar to become a prominent official was to enter a ruler's civil service. Confucius himself did not propose that might makes right, but rather that his superior should be obeyed because of his moral rectitude. In addition, loyalty does not mean subservience to authority. This is because reciprocity is demanded from the superior as well. As Confucius stated, a prince should employ his minister according to the rules of propriety. Ministers should serve the prince with faithfulness. Similarly, Mencius also said that, when the prince regards his ministers as his hands and feet, his ministers regard the prince as the belly and heart. When he regards them as his dogs and horses, they regard him as another man. When he regards them as the ground or as grass, they regard him as a robber and an enemy. Moreover, Mencius indicated that if the ruler is incompetent, he should be replaced. If the ruler is evil, then the people have the right to overthrow him. A good Confucian is also expected to remonstrate with his superiors when necessary. At the same time, a proper Confucian ruler should also accept his minister's advice, as this will help him govern the realm better. In later ages, however, emphasis was often placed more on the obligations of the ruled to the ruler, and less on the ruler's obligations to the ruled. Like filial piety, loyalty was often subverted by the autocratic regimes in China. Nonetheless, throughout the ages, many Confucians continued to fight against unrighteous superiors and rulers. Many of these Confucians suffered and sometimes died because of the conviction and action. During the Mingqing era, prominent Confucians such as Wang Yangming promoted individuality and independent thinking as a counterweight to subservience to authority. The famous thinker Huang Zongxi also strongly criticized the autocratic nature of the imperial system and wanted to keep imperial power in check. Many Confucians also realized that loyalty and filial piety have the potential of coming into conflict with one another. This can be true especially in times of social chaos, such as during the period of the Mingqing transition. Filial piety in Confucian philosophy. Filial piety is a virtue of respect for one's parents and ancestors. The Confucian classic Xiao Jing, a classic of Xiao, thought to be written around the Qin Han period, has historically been the authoritative source on the Confucian tenet of Xiao, filial piety. The book, A Conversation Between Confucius and His Student Zheng Shen, is about how to set up a good society using the principle of Xiao. The term can also be applied to general obedience, and is used in religious titles in Christian churches, like filial priests or filial vicar, for a cleric whose church is subordinate to a larger parish. Filial piety is central to Confucian role ethics. In more general terms, filial piety means to be good to one's parents, to take care of one's parents, to engage in good conduct not just towards parents but also outside the home so as to bring a good name to one's parents and ancestors, to perform the duties of one's job well so as to obtain the material means to support parents as well as carry out sacrifices to the ancestors, not be rebellious, show love, respect and support, display courtesy, ensure male heirs, uphold fraternity among brothers, wisely advise one's parents, including dissuading them from moral unrighteousness, for blindly following the parents' wishes is not considered to be Xiao, display sorrow for the sickness and death, and carry out sacrifices after the death. Filial piety is considered a key virtue in Chinese culture, and it is the main concern of a large number of stories. One of the most famous collections of such stories is the 24 Filial Exemplars. These stories depict how children exercised the filial piety in the past. While China has always had a diversity of religious beliefs, filial piety has been common to almost all of them. Historian R. Baker calls respect for the family the only element common to almost all Chinese believers. Relationships. Social harmony results in part from every individual knowing his or her place in the natural order, and playing his or her part well. When Zhou Jing of Qi asked about government, by which he meant proper administration so as to bring social harmony, Confucius replied, "There is government when the prince is prince, and a minister is minister, when the father is father, and the son is son. Particular duties arise from one's particular situation in relation to others. The individual stands simultaneously in several different relationships with different people, as a junior in relation to parents and elders, and as a senior in relation to younger siblings, students, and others. While juniors are considered in Confucianism to owe the senior seniors' reverence. Seniors also have duties of benevolence and concern toward juniors. The same is true with the husband and wife relationship, where the husband needs to show benevolence towards his wife and the wife needs to respect the husband in return. This theme of mutuality still exists in East Asian cultures even to this day. The five bonds are: ruler to ruled, father to son, husband to wife, elder brother to younger brother, friend to friend. Specific duties were prescribed to each of the participants in these sets of relationships. Such duties are also extended to the dead, where the living stand as sons to the deceased family. The only relationship where respect for elders isn't stressed was the friend-to-friend relationship, where mutual equal respect is emphasized instead. In all other relationships, high reverence is usually held for elders. The Junzi is a Chinese philosophical term often translated as gentleman or superior person, and are employed by Confucius in his works to describe the ideal man. In the I Ching it is used by the Duke of Wen. In Confucianism, the sage or wise is the ideal personality, however, it is very hard to become one of them. Confucius created the model of Junzi, gentleman, which can be achieved by any individual. Later, Zhou defined Junzi as second only to the sage. There are many characteristics of the Junzi. He can live in poverty, he does more and speaks less, he is loyal, obedient and knowledgeable. The Junzi disciplines himself. Ren is fundamental to become a Junzi. As the potential leader of a nation, a son of the ruler is raised to have a superior ethical and moral position while gaining inner peace through his virtue. To Confucius, the Junzi sustained the functions of government and social stratification through his ethical values. Despite its literal meaning, any righteous man willing to improve himself can become a Junzi. On the contrary, the Shaoran does not grasp the value of virtues and seeks only immediate gains. The petty person is egotistic and does not consider the consequences of his action in the overall scheme of things. Should the ruler be surrounded by Shaoran as opposed to Junzi, his governance and his people will suffer due to the small-mindedness. Examples of such Shaoran individuals can range from those who continually indulge in sensual and emotional pleasures all day to the politician who is interested merely in power and fame, neither sincerely aims for the long-term benefit of others. The Junzi enforces his rule over his subjects by acting virtuously himself. It is thought that his pure virtue would lead others to follow his example. The ultimate goal is that the government behaves much like a family, the Junzi being a beacon of filial piety. Rectification of names. Confucius believed that social disorder often stemmed from failure to perceive, understand, and deal with reality. Fundamentally, then, social disorder can stem from the failure to call things by the proper names, and his solution to this was Zhangming. He gave an explanation of Shangming to one of his disciples. Zilu said, "The vassal of Wei has been waiting for you, in order with you to administer the government. What will you consider the first thing to be done?" The master replied, "What is necessarily to rectify names, sir?" "Indeed," said Zilu, "you are wide off the mark. Why must there be such rectification?" The master said, "How uncultivated you are. You, the superior man, cannot care about the everything, just as he cannot go to check all himself. If names be not correct, language is not in accordance with the truth of things. If language be not in accordance with the truth of things, affairs cannot be carried on to success. When affairs cannot be carried on to success, proprieties and music do not flourish. When proprieties societies and music do not flourish, punishments will not be properly awarded. When punishments are not properly awarded, the people do not know how to move hand or foot. Therefore a superior man considers it necessarily that the names he uses may be spoken appropriately, and also that what he speaks may be carried out appropriately. What the superior man requires is just that in his words there may be nothing incorrect. Zunzi chapter on the rectification of names claims the ancient sage kings chose names that directly corresponded with actualities, but later generations confused terminology, coined new nomenclature, and thus could no longer distinguish right from wrong. Since social harmony is of utmost importance, without the proper rectification of names, society would essentially crumble and undertakings not completed